I didn't expect the night to feel like that, quiet, stretched thin between laughter and something I couldn't name. The title sounds heavier than what happened, but that's how memories work. They twist until even small moments feel dangerous. It started in the narrow hallway behind the event space, the kind with flickering yellow lights and a faint hum from the air vents. I'd been helping set up the sound system for a small art exhibit. My friend's mom was hosting it. Or rather, her best friend was. Lena, mid-40s, maybe late. Tall in a way that made her presence feel deliberate. Not beautiful in the airbrush sense. More like someone who knew her face too well to hide behind it. She spoke slowly, like words were choices she weighed before releasing them. And when she looked at you, really looked, it felt like standing too close to a fire you didn't realize was burning. I was tightening a cable near the back when she appeared beside me, her perfume soft and clean, like cedarwood and paper. "Does this wire go in here?" she asked, leaning close, holding one end between her fingers. I nodded, but my voice didn't come out right. "Yeah, that one. Yeah, right there." She smiled like she'd heard the crack in my voice. For the next hour, she moved around the room, checking the lighting, her hair slipping loose every few minutes. I caught myself watching her reflection in the gallery glass more than once. She wasn't trying to be noticed. That's what made her impossible not to. Later, when the guests began to arrive, I stayed near the back, half listening to the conversations. The crowd was older, quieter, the kind that clapped politely and drank wine like they'd rehearsed it. Lena moved through them with ease, warm, steady, grounded. But every so often, her eyes would find me again. Just a glance, long enough to make me wonder if she knew I was looking. Then came the moment, the one I keep replaying. Someone called her name, and as she turned, she brushed past me, not hard, not by mistake. Her hand touched my chest, right over the center, just a second too long. Her nails grazed through the fabric of my shirt before she pulled away. "You belong to me tonight," she said lightly, almost laughing. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe she was talking about helping her with setup, or staying to pack things up afterward. But her voice didn't sound like a joke. For a moment, I forgot where we were, forgot the noise, the music, the glasses clinking. The world shrank to that one sentence, that one touch. She was gone before I could say anything. I spent the rest of the evening pretending I wasn't searching for her, pretending the air hadn't changed. Every time I turned, I expected her to be there again, close enough that I could feel her warmth, distant enough that I'd still doubt if it happened at all. When the night ended and the guests drifted out, I found her outside near the parking lot, talking softly to my friend's mother. She didn't see me, or maybe she did, and chose not to. The wind caught the edge of her hair, and for a second, she looked like she was about to say something. She didn't. I drove home with my chest still warm where her hand had been. And no matter how much I told myself it was nothing, I knew something had shifted. Not love. Not yet. Just a spark that refused to fade. I told myself it was coincidence when I saw her again. 2 weeks had passed since the exhibit, but the feeling of that night hadn't worn off. When my friend mentioned that Lena needed help setting up her studio, just some shelves and wiring, nothing major, I said yes before I even thought about it. Her place was smaller than I expected. Sunlight spilled through tall windows, warming the mess of canvases and notebooks scattered everywhere. The air smelled faintly of turpentine and tea. She greeted me with that same careful composure, the kind that made me feel like I was being led into something private, even when she was just saying hello. "You really didn't have to come," she said, handing me a mug. "I could have called someone else." "Maybe," I said, taking it. "But you didn't." Her eyes lingered on me for a second, curious, almost unreadable, before she turned toward a stack of empty frames. "You're still sharp for someone who works with wires," she murmured. I laughed softly, but she didn't. Her silence stretched just long enough to feel like a boundary I shouldn't cross. For the next hour, we worked mostly in quiet rhythm, her passing things, me drilling, the hum of a distant fan filling the gaps where words could have gone. Every so often, I'd glance at her hands, steady, elegant, but tired. There was paint caught under her nails, a small cut near her thumb. Little signs of a life that worked harder than it let on. You don't sleep much, do you? I said finally. Her movements paused. Why would you say that? Just, you look like someone who thinks too long after the lights are off. She smiled faintly, but didn't meet my eyes. That's one way to put it. Something in her tone, the softness, the admission, made my chest tighten. It wasn't flirtation. It was human, raw, almost fragile. I wanted to say something back, but the words felt too loud for that room. She busied herself with a canvas, pretending to check its edges. You're young, she said quietly, almost to herself. You'll learn that silence has a cost. We pay for it in small ways. I didn't know what she meant, but the way she said it made me want to understand. The afternoon slipped toward evening. The light turned amber, then pale. When we finished, she stood by the window, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the street below. I packed up slowly, waiting, though I couldn't have said for what. Thank you, she said at last, still facing away. You always show up like you shouldn't, and somehow that helps. I stepped closer than I meant to, just within her shadow. Then maybe I should keep doing it. She turned, and for a heartbeat, neither of us moved. The space between us felt alive, like something had exhaled. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Don't. But her eyes said something else entirely. And that silence, heavy, trembling, endless, followed me all the way home. Rain had been threatening all afternoon. By the time I reached her studio, it finally broke, soft at first, then relentless, washing the street in silver. I hadn't meant to stop by that late, but Lena had texted, light fixtures gone again. If you're around, I was. Of course I was. The studio looked different at night. Dim lamps, windows streaked with water, the faint hum of rain against glass. She stood near a canvas half-finished, a cup of cold tea beside her. When she turned, her face looked softer somehow, tired, unguarded. I didn't think you'd actually come, she said. I couldn't let your paintings sit in the dark. She gave a quiet laugh, the kind that ended too soon. You say things like that too easily. I don't say much at all, I said, and meant it. We worked side by side for a while, our reflections moving together in the glass. The air between us felt charged, not with intention, but awareness. Every time our hands brushed, my breath hitched, and she noticed. I knew she did. At one point, I reached above her to adjust the wiring. She stepped closer to steady the ladder, and my arm brushed her shoulder. Just a touch, but it was enough to make time stutter. I looked down. She was already looking up. For a second, neither of us moved. The rain grew louder, filling the silence that stretched between her inhale and mine. I could see the pulse at her neck, the faint tremor in her hand still gripping the ladder. Then her phone rang. She froze, the kind of stillness that comes from recognition. The name on the screen made her lips tighten. Excuse me, she whispered, stepping away. Her voice changed when she answered. Low, careful, almost apologetic. I didn't mean to listen, but the walls were too thin for pretending. I told you I'm fine, she said quietly. No, don't come here. I said don't. Her back was to me, her free hand clutching her arm like she needed to hold herself together. When she hung up, she didn't turn around. Everything okay? I asked, my voice softer than it should have been. She hesitated, then nodded, though I could see it wasn't true. Just someone who doesn't know when to let go. Her reflection in the window caught mine. Two shapes standing too close, too still. I should go, I said. You could stay until the rain stops, she murmured, finally meeting my eyes. It wasn't an invitation. It was something quieter, maybe loneliness disguised as politeness. I wanted to stay. God, I did. But I could feel the weight of that phone call still hanging in the room, like the echo of something unfinished. I'll finish this last wire, I said, trying to sound normal. She nodded, looking at the floor. You always leave before it gets complicated. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because if I did, if I said anything at all, I knew I wouldn't leave. The voicemail wasn't meant for me. That's what made it worse. I was helping Lena pack up her studio before she left for a weekend retreat. Something about needing air, needing quiet. She'd been distant for days, more distracted than usual, like her thoughts were pacing behind her eyes. Her phone was on the counter, screen lit with a new notification. I wouldn't have listened if it hadn't started playing on its own, the voice spilling through the speaker like it had been waiting. A man's voice. Tired, low, familiar enough to make my chest tighten. Lena, I saw your last message. You don't have to keep running from ghosts. I still keep that photo, the one from the cabin. He looks so much like him now. It's hard to ignore. Then a pause. A sigh. Click. She appeared in the doorway just as I was setting the phone down. For a moment, she didn't say anything, just studied me, her expression unreadable. You heard it, didn't you? I swallowed. I didn't mean to, I know. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she picked up the phone and locked it. You weren't supposed to hear that. I waited, unsure if I should leave. The silence felt fragile, like one wrong word would break it. Finally, she leaned against the wall, eyes half closed. That was Daniel, my ex-husband. The he in the photo is our son. It took me a second to breathe. You have a son? Had, she corrected, so quietly I almost missed it. He was 23. He. She stopped, pressed her palm to her mouth. He died 3 years ago. Accident. Daniel and I, we never recovered from it. The room shrank around her voice. I'm sorry, I said, and it felt useless, like throwing pebbles at a collapsing wall. She shook her head. Don't. You didn't know. But I did in some way. The exhaustion in her eyes, the way she looked at me like she was seeing someone else. All of it made sense now. I wanted to reach out, to touch her hand, to say something that mattered. Instead, I stood there, frozen between comfort and restraint. She exhaled slowly. When you first walked into that gallery, I thought I was losing my mind. You had his posture, his tone, even the way you avoided small talk. She let out a brittle laugh. It scared me. Her words settled deep, not as flattery, but as something heavier. A borrowed familiarity. Is that why you keep pushing me away? I asked quietly. She looked at me for a long moment, eyes glistening but unbroken. No, that's why I let you stay. It wasn't a confession. It was a wound showing itself, tender, deliberate, and irreversible. Outside, the rain started again. And though neither of us moved, the world between us shifted, quietly, completely, like a tide turning under the surface. The studio lights were off except for one lamp in the corner, throwing long shadows across the room. Rain again, always rain, it seemed, soft and steady against the windows, the kind that quiets the city and makes everything feel smaller. Lena was sitting on the floor, legs crossed, an open sketchbook on her lap. She looked up when I stepped in, but didn't speak. Her face was bare of makeup, her hair tied back loosely. Somehow she looked younger, but more tired, like the kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from lack of sleep. I didn't want to be alone tonight, she said simply. I nodded, setting down my coat. You don't have to be. For a while, we said nothing. I sat beside her on the cold wooden floor, close enough to feel the heat from her shoulder. She kept sketching, slow, uneven lines, the sound of the pencil faint and rhythmic. I watched her hand move, watched the paper fill with what looked like a face. When she stopped, I realized it was mine. Not perfect, not exact, but enough to catch the shape of me, or maybe who she thought I was. Do you see him? She asked, her voice breaking a little. The part of him that's still there when I look at you. I wanted to say no, that I wasn't anyone's replacement, that I didn't want to be. But she looked at me with such fragile honesty that the words never came. I see you, I said instead. Something in her posture eased, just slightly. We sat there, the silence heavy but not painful. The rain kept time for us. There was no need for more words. We'd already said too much in all the times we'd stayed quiet. After a while, she set the pencil down and turned toward me. You shouldn't have come, she whispered. I know. And yet, her hand hovered near mine, trembling just enough for me to notice. When our fingers finally met, it wasn't romantic. It wasn't even certain. It was just real, two people holding onto the only thing that still felt alive in the wreckage of everything else. She leaned her forehead against mine, eyes closed. I could feel her breath, unsteady, warm. There was no kiss, no confession, just the truth of being seen and the ache of knowing it couldn't last. I'll miss this, she said softly. It's not over, I said, though I didn't know if I believed it. She smiled faintly, almost painfully. It always ends, love. That's how we know it was real. We stayed like that until the rain began to fade, until the sound of the city crept back in and the night lost its edge. And when I finally stood to leave, her hand slipped from mine, slow, unwilling, memorizing the shape of goodbye. The door closed gently behind me, but her warmth stayed, echoing in my skin like something that refused to be forgotten. It's been months since that night, the night we didn't call anything by its name. I still drive past her street sometimes, slower than I should, watching for the soft glow of her studio window. Most nights it's dark now. She moved a few towns over, closer to the ocean, where she said the air feels more forgiving. We don't talk much. A message here, a check-in there, small, careful threads that keep from breaking completely. But I've come to understand something. Not every connection is meant to become a story you can explain. Some just live quietly inside you, changing the way you see everything that comes after. Before her, I thought love was about certainty, a feeling you could claim, a moment that declared itself. But with Lena, it was the opposite. Love became something silent, unspoken, almost sacred in its restraint. It wasn't about owning, or needing, or even staying. It was about witnessing. I saw her grief, her strength, her stillness, and in some impossible way, she saw through the noise in me, too. I've started fixing things again, small jobs, side gigs, wiring that hums when it's done right. Every time the light flickers on, I think of her, the way she'd tilt her head, studying the brightness, always half lost in thought. She once told me that silence has a cost. I didn't understand it then. I do now. Silence costs you the comfort of pretending nothing happened. But it gives you truth, raw, simple, and sometimes enough. The last time we saw each other, she gave me one of her sketches. Folded it once, neat, like a letter. It wasn't the one she'd drawn of me. This one was different. Two blurred figures sitting under rain. No faces, no names. Just a shared shadow between them. On the back, she'd written, "Some moments don't end. They just live elsewhere." I keep it in my drawer. Not as a memory of what almost happened, but as proof that something real did. People think love is about arrival, about two people finding each other and staying. But maybe it's more about the spaces in between. The moments that don't make sense until they're gone. Lena taught me that. Without meaning to, without trying. And every time it rains, I still think of that first night. Her hand brushing my chest, her voice low and steady. "You belong to me tonight." Maybe she was right, but not in the way I thought. Maybe belonging isn't about being kept. Maybe it's about being remembered, deeply, quietly, without the need to touch again. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?